Well, good morning and welcome to another Monday morning. It is the 27th day of June 2022. Can you believe that it's already the 27th day of June? Halfway through the year, the last Monday in the month of June. Well, you better believe it. That is where we are at today. Good morning and welcome to Men on Monday. We continue our look at leadership. Our last show, again, I must apologize. We were unable to have our broadcast last week, but this week we continue right where we left off. And there was an interesting question from one of our participants about men leading versus women leading. And quite a stir it started. Started, it caught Sinclair's attention. You know what? Today, that's the discussion. Men versus women in leadership. Are there differences? Is there really a difference? Are there poignant parts that you must look at? Should it be that women are better in an area, men are better in a particular area? Maybe we have areas of growth in particular areas. So we're going to examine it today. So I encourage all of you to gather around wherever you are today as we discuss men and women in leadership. So, gentlemen, how have you been? I hope you had a great Father's Day weekend and also a great week last week. So, let's start with Pastor Bynoe, Minister Sinclair, Bishop Mark. How have you gentlemen been?
Hey, good morning, Marissa. Good morning, panel. Good morning, Barbados and the wider world. I've been good. Had a great Father's Day. The family really made sure to treat me good. The church family also treated me very well. Gave me a beautiful basket. So I'm appreciative and grateful for what the Lord is doing.
Me. Sorry. Blessings in the name of Jesus. Yes, I had a wonderful Father's Day. I can't say want to say to all the people that they definitely be stepping up as far as taking men out and doing stuff for Father's Day. One if Father's Day would have passed, it would have been a little blimp, you know what I mean, on the road. But I find that people really took the time out and took the father's places. We went out to lunch and I saw a whole bunch of people there at the restaurant, even guys with their own kids, even without the female there. So, I celebrate that and I thank God for being this season to see me maybe a celebrator.
Good morning to everyone, panel, our listeners, or should I say our viewers. Um, I had a wonderful day too. It was treated quite well by my church itself. And then the wifey made sure that she put the icing on the cake. So she did her part, her role, and my daughter. So I felt like Sinclair, I agree that I think it's not the restaurants are bursting, but we have seen a change where where I think people are catching the vision, the ladies and others. But you still don't feel that, it's like this big event coming up when you're talking about the ladies. But we are grateful, and as Sinclair said, we are seeing improvement, so we're happy.
Right, I was trying to unmute there. I'm glad you guys had a great weekend. I'm glad that you were all taken care of, that we have excellent reports about how you guys were treated in terms of your Father's Day endeavors. So it's good to have you back with us. It's also good to have our women with us today who are with us on Men on Monday. It's always good to have the support of our women too. Today we're talking about leadership, men versus women. Um, are there any differences? Is there any difference in the way that they lead? So who's going to kick us off this morning? Is it Bishop Mark, Pastor Bynoe, Minister Sinclair? Who's going to talk
Well,
first?
it definitely ain't going to be me. I really wanted Minister Sinclair to jump in there because I want to hear what perspective he can come from, and then we might throw some licks in it. But no, but I wanted him to start off first, and then we'll follow on from him.
I do sure what sort of tactic that was just for, but I can take it. I can take it. Okay. When the last time we spoke about 2 weeks ago, yeah, a lot of people were excited with the topic. So our apologies to those who were seeking to be on last week. Yeah, but the thing about it, why let me start to I guess get the pot going. Is there a difference? In some instances, I believe there's no difference, and I do believe in areas that there are differences. Me personally, so I'm going to give my subjective perspective. I was stir the pot in the middle a little deeper. I'll add some cayenne and some bonnet peppers, some hot peppers later. But the thing about it is that I do believe that I don't think, for instance, leading a company, leading an organization, leading things like that, I think that women and men have different strategies and both are successful. I don't think there's one way to skin a cat. Um, Generally speaking, what I have found is that men and women overall are different at the extremes, but we're similar 60 or 60%. And in that 60 to 70%, where we are similar, the differences are personalities. So a lot of people might try to say, oh, there's a man thing or a woman thing. Actually, it's a personality thing. And sometimes people get caught up in the gender issue. So I do believe that there are similarities, and I do believe that there's some instances where women actually make better leaders in a lot of areas, especially when it comes to things like humanities and stuff like that. When it comes to like the science, technology, engineering, mathematics, it has been internationally tested that men are the ones that gravitate towards those things, more task oriented, that don't take a lot of emotional strategies and stuff like that. So my thing is, realistically, yes, there are things that men are better at leading, and there are things that women are better at leading. And that is where we'll start the discussion and allow the bishop pastor to join in from there.
All right. I basically agree with what you're saying there, and Sinclair. The whole thing about, I think you hit the nail on the head at the start by saying personality has a lot to do with it. Your personality traits and so on. But what I would say is that it depends on the type of particular activity that the lady is managing, and the man too. But it also one of the struggles that I think the ladies would have in terms of leadership is when they have to lead um, women, because they tend to get more licks from leading the women when they have to lead the women than maybe men. But I think that women are more will participate more, and I think they're more what's what they're looking for. They're more cooperative. Men tend to, in leadership, tend to command and control. But the ladies would I think, when it comes to communication, I would give them some points. It doesn't mean that men don't do a good job too, but I think in the area of communicating, what should I say? Um, in terms of helping along more so than the man who would obviously be just giving the commands and wanted to control by rules and regulations and that kind of thing. So I don't think that. I think you can have bad leaders where women are concerned, and bad leaders where men are concerned, and then good too. But I will also say this, that because there are other challenges that women have or perceived to have in terms of workplace or whether it be with church, sometimes they are affected by these things, and therefore walk with the thoughts or with the actions that I am a woman, so it's going to be more difficult for me, which is not always the truth. And so I think they walk with chips on their shoulders. And so I believe that affects the quality or the ability to lead the way that they should. Because you say, I've seen situations where you would give a lady the keys to the business, in other words, get a promotion, and the whole thing would go to her head, and because they try so hard to be better than the man or better than whatever, they tend to then go a little overboard. But as I said, I think women have proven that they can be good leaders, but many times they take the chip on the shoulder, signs that something that they got to do, because they feel they always have to fight into get a position, when in reality it may not be so.
Yeah, definitely agree with what the gentleman has said. It's a topic that I was doing some research on, and as Sinclair pointed out, a lot of times there are similarities, but then it depends on how you define leadership. Because if you define leadership as somebody taking charge, then that's typically a male-oriented type of leadership. If you define leadership in the sense of influence, where you build relationships with people, as Bishop Mark said, you help them along, that kind of thing, then you tend to find that women excel in leadership. Now, when you look at some of the different studies, it actually shows when it comes particularly to transformational leadership, which is a big area in leadership, it actually shows that women tend to be better leaders when it comes to transformational leadership. Yeah, if you're looking at autocratic leadership, many times where you kind of take charge out front, that type of leadership, then you would find that men tend to be very dominant in autocratic leadership, especially if they are from the baby boomer generation, because the baby boomer generation was more of a take charge, do it all by myself type of leader. Yeah. And then when we come down through the generations, the generation Y and generation X, it started to differ where people became more participative. So when you look at women in terms of how they lead, many things they lead through the context of relationships, but as Bishop Mark said, sometimes when they may be working with other women, it might be a challenge in some areas. So there's a lot of it. I'm trying to kind of pull some of the different areas together because, as I said, I was doing some research on this when the topic was posed. I was thinking, well, this is an excellent topic. And while we're talking about women versus leaders, women versus men, sorry, it's not so much it's not a competition, and I think that's part of the problem, that sometimes we frame it in terms of a competition, but God has gifted different people differently. He's gifted men and women differently in certain areas, and so there are areas, because of how women are constituted, they will lead from that. They will lead from their personality, they will lead from their sensitivity, they would lead from their empathy, they would lead from their ability to identify with people, that kind of thing. Not that men don't do it. Yeah, men can be programmed in that way, but there's certain areas in which the woman would be more dominant when it comes to some aspects of leadership. And as Minister Sinclair pointed out, when it comes to the areas, the STEM areas, the science, the technology, the engineering, the mathematics, those are areas traditionally dominated by male leadership. Yeah, but when it comes to the humanities and so on, then those are areas where you tend to see women dominate. Even like within our educational system, you tend to see more female leaders than male leaders, because that's an area that women gravitate to. So there are a lot of different areas we could drill down into some of the differences, but there are some differences based on how women are constituted and based on the skills of leadership. There are some skills that women tend to manifest more than men.
I have listened and I've noted all that the gentlemen have said this morning in terms of leadership. And quite interestingly, I jumped to something that Bishop Mark said in terms of women. When it comes to, we always hear that when it comes to women and other women, that there's always the challenges of women, I guess personalities, as they say. But overall, as Pastor Bynoe was just talking about, in terms of understanding leadership, I was looking at some research, and it says that gender does play a specific role in defining leadership. And that generally stems from some of the historical focus that we put on leadership, in terms of the fact that we've seen that men were generally the leaders. Initially, they go out, they head of homes. Usually they would head corporations, while women remained in the home, keeping the home together. And quite interestingly, I saw a quote that said that women don't support men in their pursuits. That while the men are out there, women are also building homes on the inside. And I found out quite interesting in terms of what we're discussing today, looking at leadership, because very often people define leadership only first as a man's responsibility. But I believe that leadership also stems from wherever you have influence. And that's really one of the key aspects of leadership: influence. You must be able to influence. If you're in your home, you must be able to influence your wife, influence your children, influence you all are all ministers in your own right. Influence your parishioners, your congregation, because it's all about impacting them positively. But there are also quite interesting some things that come out from a woman's perspective, and I'll say that. One of the things that I've noted that is that Bishop Moore talked about sometimes the climb or the ascension to the role of leadership. Women tend to have it harder when it comes to the to leadership. They're put under the microscope a lot more when it comes to leadership. Yes, I see Bishop Mark's face. I see St. Clair's face. Yes, they're put under the microscope more when it comes to leadership. And this is always the response whenever we have this discussion with women and men in leadership. Reason saying that I worked in a company where I was amongst men. They were outnumbered by men. And whenever it came to um, certain responses, you would see that men did not see things because women saw a different perspective. They didn't identify with it. And that's one of the things that I've noticed. When it comes to leadership, women are generally more inclusive, if I can say that. They see things from a different perspective. Just like sometimes when you guys are in your home and your wife says, "But look at this and look at that," and did you see this? And you say, "Oh, I didn't see that perspective." Just like when she said, you say the same thing to her. So for me, when it comes to leadership, I find that women are more, and I'll take my licks for it. Women are more. We have a different scope and a different focus versus how men see it. And I laugh when Bishop Mark said it because very often men do not see the struggles that women have when it comes to um, being understood and received in leadership roles. And women who are, and I've had this discussion with women in the business sector and the organizations that I'm a part of, the struggles that women generally have, men don't generally have when it comes to being understood and received as leaders. You can say that, Sinclair, that's all right. When there are environments where men are more dominant, their leadership roles are more received and dominant, you find that women have a greater challenge with being understood and received as leaders. And I know that the women, unless you're a woman, you don't understand certain perspectives, and that's the truth.
Yeah,
Um,
But
that's what
Marissa,
said.
I will back you up a little bit on that, or I will back you up somewhat on that. Yeah, there has traditionally been a glass ceiling, and it depends on the context, it depends on the culture. It is more an
That's
issue,
right.
like
That's why
for
I said business.
example,
Yeah,
like in the area of business, it can be a challenge because you have to remember that in society, a lot of the leadership positions were dominated by men, and that was something that was historic. That was something that was traditional, and so the idea of women assuming leadership was a struggle over the years because they had to fight, as it were, to get to that place where they could be recognized and affirmed as leaders. And if we look, for example, in the context of the church, that's a pretty male dominated area in terms of leadership. Yeah, we do have more women rising in leadership, but it is still a challenge. And I don't think that women can fully understand that. Yeah, I'm not saying that women are not recognized as leaders because we've seen some change. We've seen women assigned to very high positions, but I'm sure that if we go through some companies, we will still find that when it comes to the top positions, the upper hierarchy, that those positions are still dominated by men. But I think we've seen a change. But you do have the challenge of the glass ceiling that was there, where women could go so far and no more. Before, a woman was to be a secretary, she was to be a nurse, she was to hold certain professions and so on. But when it came to being above that, it was a challenge historically. I think it's improving. We're seeing a definite change in like, for example, in politics, we're seeing a definite change in the corporate setting. As I said earlier, the educational system pretty much has been dominated by women. So we've seen a lot of women have high positions in the area of education. But it's worth studying out. It is a concern when I've watched a couple programs, well, not a couple programs, but one program in particular that I was watching on CBC, where the focus was on women. They mentioned that struggle in the area of leadership and ascending to certain positions. So it is apparently a reality, but it may not be so in all contexts, but it's definitely so in some areas. But I do think that there has been improvement over the years.
I just wanted to interject. I didn't say that it's all generally. I was speaking, and I prefaced it by
True.
saying that men were fully understood as leaders. So therefore, when women try to, um, you know, ascend, it is a challenge. And I know you guys are laughing, but that's something that I have personally experienced, where I found that when, and even as Pastor Bynoe said, when you look at traditional areas, women are challenged more in those areas when it comes to leadership. But we've seen women become more educated because research has shown that more women have now started to study and gain momentum in certain areas. But there's always still that challenge where women, as Pastor Bynoe put it, the glass ceiling, they try to break through it. There's always that challenge there where women try to move forward. Go ahead, Bishop Mark, Minister Sinclair. I'm sure you guys have something to share.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't negate your experience, Marissa, because I know that when you experience these things for yourself, you have firsthand knowledge, and so therefore, or firsthand experience. But I think even although the and maybe in some areas there's still this whole thing, I still think it comes back to and also how Sinclair, Mr. Sinclair speaks about it, and people later on here, because he was saying something that we always got these things about particular mindsets that are really in there, because that's what I said earlier about the chip on the shoulder. Because if you go into these situations and, for example, you're putting forward ideas and they are not taken on board, you might very well have to look at what your ideas are seeking to bring about. It might mean that it might be tremendous change. So at the present moment, you can't do it. But if you got a chip on your shoulder every time you put forward something and it is not embraced, then you start to blame the whole system of, oh, I'm a woman, so therefore if Sinclair to say they want to do it, but like Marissa saying ain't gonna do it. So I'm just saying, even though I agree with all that y'all have said, that there are still issues. I would think maybe look around and see where women are dominating quite a number of professions. Don't know about for you, women driving bus, women are executives, women are managers. I mean, if you look at some of the big businesses that have been around for a long time, you have at the top executives who are women, and so on these boards and so on. So I think even although that particular thing is there, it is not as widespread, and it's great, especially in Barbados. I think that we have a system where women can really, or have been, breaking what you call that glass ceiling and so on. But as I said, I think sometimes what happens is that because women come in with all this thing in their head that, look, this can be hard, they're gonna be keeping me down. So every time you focus on doing something, you deal with the perspective purely from what you have in your head and what you have experienced, and not the reality that is before you sometimes. So that's where I hope I haven't gone too technical or whatever, but that's where I think it is. That we got to get past this thing that, oh, we have to get the women, or the women can't get ahead. When the evidence suggests that the women do it quite well in relation to even some men.
Let me go subjective and then I go objective first. Let me ask you, Bishop Mark. Could you open your mic a second? Yeah? Let me ask you a question. Open your mic a second, Bishop Mark. I'll talk to you a minute.
Go ahead.
Right. So, question: in your journey to become bishop, has it not been a struggle? Have you not felt unfeared? Have you not felt snubbed? Have you not felt left out, even in the church environment?
Yes, please.
And is it because of what?
Well, it's because of people's attitude. Sometimes people look at where it came from and who your father is, and as a fellow friend,
it was real difficult because I personally know your struggle, even being recognized in the church community.
Yes,
and it was hard. Good.
Yes,
Bring
please.
the tears. Good.
Yes, please.
Okay. Open your mic, Bishop Edison, if you don't mind asking a question.
I'm
Good.
gonna
You
say
like coming to you too.
even before you ask the question,
Yeah.
if we were to look at the issue of race, and we were to ask the question, have white people ever struggled anything? Have they ever dealt with anything negative? Have they ever had to struggle and so on? Some of them would say, yeah, we had to struggle.
No, I don't get there. I tell you personally, don't like Bishop Edson. Bishop Edson.
Hold on. I just make it a point that it doesn't invalidate the reality that there
I come into a point and I've asked the question. In your journey, have you not felt snubbed? Have you never felt like you were help on the ceiling?
Sorry, I didn't catch the last
Do you feel
part.
if you held under a ceiling, even in your, let me
Yeah,
use,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
you,
yeah. Definitely,
thank
I
you.
would agree
That's
with
all I'm
that. I
asking.
would agree with
As
that.
I'm saying, yeah,
Yeah.
we could talk about gender and also economics. And I'm saying, this one of the reasons I'm saying, yeah. And the thing about it is, and they was saying, is that for a lot of women, and one reason I could come into objective reasoning now, because as a therapist, I have coached women. And so this isn't me just being subjective from a person, from an objective perspective. I have coached women to get higher paying jobs. I have coached women to move forward in her areas. Why? One of the first things I tell them, don't take it personal. One of the things about it, if you're in a competition, it's a competition. It isn't gender and all those things. And you can see clearly across Barbados. Going to any, and I'm telling you, I coach women. I mean, I understand you. I'm not negating your personal experience, Marissa. And this is exactly my point. Women say they want to hear, they say they want to think. So I'm not, and this is the thing because we talk about take your licks and we talk about having a discussion. Cool. I'm just saying, I have personally coached women that have broke ceilings because they came and said, oh, things da da da. And I said, this is what we're doing. Yeah, don't take it personally. This is what it do. This is how to type it. This is how to negotiate. And they're going because they're going, oh, I deserve this. I say you don't deserve anything. You deserve nothing. Don't go into you deserving anything. This is how to approach the meeting. This is how to approach the boss. This is how to approach your thing. And you know what? They rate for work $1,800 to $4,000. Because I can take away the fact that you're a woman. I had a lady, she's a very successful accountant, and she was held on to what she thought was the same as a black woman that is not Barbadian. I said, take away the fact that you're black and you're not a Barbadian and you're a woman. Let's have a discussion. Because she went there with the edge and everything, she was given constructive criticism or she was unfair as far as she was concerned because I'm not a Barbadian, because I'm black, and because I'm a woman. I said, take those away. And all of a sudden, she started to see things differently. You want to know what? She got a raise within a couple of months. I'm not saying that people don't experience what I experience. I experience things as a black man in areas, right? And it's very hard. I'm not saying that it is whatever. There are areas I'm telling you that I go as a man and women treat me differently. I will tell you, anytime I'm doing anything financial, I take my wife. If you want to get through with a financial anything, take a woman. Don't be stupid because majority of decision making in financial institutions are women. If you can buy a car, I tell women, take a dude. Don't go buy a car by yourself because there's a high probability guy is trying to oversell you the car. It is what it is. And I'm saying in Barbados, and Bishop Edson mentioned it earlier, in the academic environment, it is 90% females. It is hard enough for even men to get into these spaces. Across the world, women are the leaders in political systems. Check across the world. Across the world, not even Barbados, across the world, men do not have an issue with women leading. As I said to persons, we have a female prime minister, and I talk about kicking it across the world. Why are we seeing placards of men saying, oh, we need a male leader? Men don't care. So this idea that men are suppressing women, and especially as a black man, and I say it to women all the time, is we were never in this position to suppress y'all. We were both suppressed. So the mere fact that I'm getting this kick because me and you, we were both suppressed, do our history. When we go through history in itself, it was not this black man that helped you oppress. I was oppressed too. So don't give me this kick like, oh, we held this position and women had to. No, we could have voted and you could have voted. You know what I'm saying? So all of a sudden we gain this thing from women. I said, no, that is not true. Let me go through history. When the feminist movement created, it wasn't black women that started this because black women weren't part of it. Black women got harvested to make the movement more solid. So it's crazy. Don't I mean this thing of me being this oppressive person? I tell them not that dude. I'm not the dude in Tyler Perry movies. I'm not the guy over there doing the crazy stuff. I'm not that guy. So I've never oppressed or suppressed women. And I'm saying, generally speaking, across the board, we have not suppressed and oppressed women. We have actually opened the door for women to be in organizations. We are the ones part of boards voting women into positions. We're the ones that actually invented technology so when we have the menstrual cycle, they can still come to work. So the idea that men are these Neanderthals suppressing women or oppressing women, I think is very unfair. Do they have people that are suppressing or oppressive? Yes. And you want to know what? Look at women now in those positions. They got women that are just as suppressive and oppressive as some of the men. So there's some that can't handle leadership totality. But I'm saying we are taking to me, you're taking a very minuscule set of people and projecting it across the board and saying that men are doing these things. And I said, I lead women, period, as a therapist to get better jobs. I got women that know are internationally making thousands of dollars. I mean, not little thousands, lots and lots of money. Why? Because I took away that ideology that is because you're a woman. And all of a sudden I recognize, oh shoot, it's because I could go in there and negotiate fairly. And that is my position. And I still got my thing to stir the pot. Trust me, every time you stop pot stirred, you ever get stir pot yet? I got to say to stir the pot so hard. God is good.
Quite interesting, Sinclair. Again, you're not a woman. So while you might have said that you may have been able to help some women, please understand that this is still the perspective of women. Unless you are
I
there,
get
you
that,
don't quite understand.
Marissa. But okay, but
Let's
see the same
transition
thing,
to your
Marissa.
next question because
No,
you and I will
no, Marissa.
we will
Okay,
stay
no,
here
no,
the
we're not
entire
doing this.
morning.
Marissa, okay,
Right?
this is the thing.
So,
Women
no,
say they
let's
want to have
continue. What's our next?
discussions.
What is our
No,
next? Let's continue. What is our
you see,
next
okay?
perspective that we're going to stir the pot with?
I'm not okay.
Let's
I
go
mean, go
because we're
on.
talking
We
about
will
men
move
versus
on.
leaders.
But all I'm saying is we will move on. But I'm just saying, as I always state in discussions where people say we want to have men's opinion, as I say to you all the time, realistically, people don't want to have men's opinion. So men learn not to talk. That's all I'm saying. And many times women tell men their perspective and men listen. So that is what I'm saying. I'm not trying to make the situation uncomfortable. I'm just saying if you're having a thing where men are having a discussion, then let's do it in a healthy way. I just don't get it. That is what I'm saying. That is what I'm saying.
Yeah, in some areas, there definitely will be difference of perspectives because even if, as I referenced the issue of race, there are always things that people can do to get across the, to move beyond the system, but you still have issues that are systemic that might still need to be addressed in some way or in some reality. And that's why I don't minimize some, because there are differences in perspectives on this. There are differences in perspectives in terms of the advantages, disadvantages that the different sexes have to go through in the different contexts. So I think there's going to be the subjective element, there's going to be that objective element. And whereas, yes, there are people that can be coached beyond the system because you can play a system. If there are injustices, for example, in a business environment, in leadership, you are taught how to be political. That's one of the skills that you develop in terms of management. You have the conceptual, you have the technical, you have the interpersonal, and you have the political. And many times there are people who don't like the political. But if you're going to be a well-rounded manager, the thing is that sometimes you have to operate despite the system. It doesn't justify certain things, but you have to operate despite the system. And therefore, you may have to become political where that is not naturally your default. So in a sense, I can understand what Minister Sinclair is saying when he's talking about coaching people in whatever environment, because sometimes the environment, unfortunately, may not be fair. It may not be fair. And I believe, one of the areas that I love is human resource management. And one of the things that is a motivation factor is the whole issue of equity. You have to have equity in your systems and so on. But unfortunately, you don't always have that equity. So when you don't have that fairness, what do? Do you go and you cry and you lament? And that's one of the areas too that affect women, because when you look at the research, you also find that women tend to worry. And so they take on a lot of the burden. Yeah. And it becomes burdensome, and leadership sometimes can become a burden. And it can hold them back. But do you go and cry, or do you look for a strategy that says, look, I'm not going to allow the system to keep me down? So I believe there is that reality that in some contexts, women are not allowed to rise to the higher levels. And I'm sure that if we were to talk to some women would tell you that very fervently, not just Marissa, but I think there are other women that would feel that sometimes, certain contexts, they don't get the opportunity to rise to the level that they would like to. And then, as Minister Sinclair pointed out, that's where now they may have to be able to do certain things. Like, for example, they may have to leave one environment and find another environment where they get opportunity to reach the level that they want to reach. So then there are certain practical things that you might have to do as a leader that says, look, this system ain't working for me. And I know that Bishop Mark would have gone through that, where sometimes you got to leave one environment to be able to rise to the next level in a different area. And that's leadership too. Leadership is recognizing where you got to take initiative to do certain things, either to change the system or to operate outside of the system and develop your own system, because that's all part of leadership. Interesting discussion. I am sure that if we have some women in here, it will be hot for truth. It will be back and forth. They would take Sinclair to task. Sinclair would take them to task, and it will go back and forth ad infinitum. So, so yeah. So we got to move on to some other points as far as the differences between women and male leadership.
Yeah, I tend to I take all you've said there, Pastor. But what I think we have to realize. I mean, what Sinclair said is very true, because a lot of times women say they want to hear from us men, but then when we hit hard, it's a little difficult. But I think that we should not do think that the scenario is perfect, because as you were saying, Pastor, that I believe that the situation that Marissa was spoken about is still real for some women. I would not want to sit here as a man and say, oh, it's just the woman's fault, and one of the ladies need to move on. But there's an aspect to it which is really real, because sometimes you might be creating or you might have a perspective that is completely different to what the reality is, purely because you've had some issues maybe before. So you're going to each situation thinking, well, this is what the norm is. And I think that was I was trying to say, that when we look at it overall, there have been a lot of changes. There have been a lot of times where women have been allowed to breathe, women have been allowed to do, women have been able to positively impact what has been happening in business, in church, especially with Lord. Don't talk about church. But what we must also say, if you're going to be honest and balance the whole thing, is that even although there are some realities that still exist, and I would never think, I don't have both, I would think that Minister Sinclair was saying that, everything is perfect and, the women being miserable. But the reality is that there have been a lot of development. I mean, women, you can look at any sphere of operation and see women flowing thing. I agree also, Marissa, that we have to accept the reality that there's still certain circumstances where women can be suppressed, and that's the reality. But what we must also accept is that it is not as bad. I don't even say it's bad. It has improved tremendously. We are at a stage where if you check school, you check people studying at UWA, you check whatever, women are dominating. I don't hear no movement that says, "Oh Lord, women trying to keep me down." Because, as he said, Sinclair said earlier, we have made every effort through various institutions coming up over the years, and I'm an old man, so I know what we're talking about, to fight for women's rights, to fight for women to be heard, and for women to be seen. So much so that you would find the ladies driving past, some of the same fellas that would be hitting on them, the ladies now driving past them in the vehicles and the four-wheel drives, and the fella at the bus stop shaking, right? Why? Because the women have been empowered. And this is the reality. But I will never, ever negate, for example, Marissa's and other ladies who would have gone into an environment who ain't catch it yet. That's the reality. There are environments that will seek to put women in a cocoon, because maybe the leaders are not as progressive as you would like. Maybe they're brought up. See, what we call the culturalization is one where women, maybe their religious beliefs, where the woman is coming in here and dominate what we are doing. But I would say, and agree with Sinclair and the others, that the situation is a lot better for ladies. Women can be pilots, women can be bus drivers, women can be teachers, women, anything. They have the opportunity. As a matter of fact, I would add to this that the men have similar opportunities, and the men tend to want the fast way, the fast lane, the fast buck, whatever. But I have to say here that women, and not only Barbados, throughout the Caribbean and so on, have been improved their position. But I believe that this whole glass ceiling thing is still affecting some. But I would have to say, if we look at the positive side, we have improved a lot.
Yeah, definitely. There has been improvement, and I'm grateful to God for that. Even within the context of the church, we do see that there are persons not stepping up, because women have always traditionally been willing to step up, but there have been some opportunities being created for women. There's still a bit of the traditional mindset in some ways, where sometimes people are uncomfortable with women ascending to the top positions in a denomination and so on. In my fellowship, it would be the role of bishop or general bishop. Those are the two top positions, and those two positions have pretty much always been held by men. We haven't really seen any big differentiation there, but we've seen a number of women become missionaries, a number of women become pastors, and so on, and are coming alongside of the executive. Has tended to be pretty limited as far as a female presence has been concerned, but we are seeing an emergence. And normally, and when a woman came into the position, in terms of the executive, it tended to be more of a secretarial type thing. So it tended to be limiting, but that is evolving. That is evolving, and it's coming along. But there are some areas of difference, and as we've mentioned, there are actually some areas in which women predominate. In fact, there was one study that studied 16 areas of leadership, comparing men and women. What they discovered, that 12 out of the 16 areas, the women actually dominated. Yeah, so that was one of the studies that was done. And as I mentioned earlier, when it comes to transformational leadership, you tend to see women demonstrating the qualities of transformational leaders more so than the men. There was a study done in 2009, which showed that the majority of women can be defined as people-based. And so they have a strong emphasis on people. And that's why often you will find women gravitate to like human resource leadership, because they're very focused on the human resources of the company. They use role models, setting clear expectations and rewards. Another study found that women tend to adopt a more democratic or participative style and are more collaborative and work to enhance and increase others' self-worth. And that was something that Bishop Mark would have mentioned in terms of women kind of being hands-on in terms of encouraging and developing people and that sort of thing. And the same study found that the leadership style more often used by men tend to prioritize operational over strategic issues. So it was more the day-to-day running of the company. And sometimes, unfortunately, the men were not always as strategic. And strategic is more long-term thinking. Yeah, so you because I think you will find that women are very much security conscious. They're always looking at the stability, the longevity of something, the viability of something. Whereas sometimes men make the mistake of being a little too short term in their thinking, because some men are action oriented. So again, the thing about leadership though is that you can have generalizations, yeah, because you are going to have different types of leaders, both men and women, and therefore there are going to be those areas of similarity. But this study showed that there was a slight difference between the men and the women. The men were more into giving directions and orders and adopting a command and control type of leadership. So they were very goal oriented, authoritative, and decisive. In some cases, women may want to ponder on something, so they might tend to be deliberative in certain areas. Yeah, men, unfortunately, from time to time, we can be impulsive. We see something, we go and we do it sometimes immediately, and sometimes we're not as reflective as we should be. That's why sometimes our wives will try to pull us back, because we would want to run and do something because we think it's a good idea. And sometimes the wife would say, man, honey, we really got to sit down and look at this and think about this and consider the implications and that kind of thing. So you do have those kinds of differences generally. But again, we have to remember that this in some ways will still be a generalization, even though it's borne out by certain studies. The studies are not comprehensive. They've not studied every female leader, every male leader. So there are still going to be limitations in the studies, but based on how men and women are configured, you can begin to see some differences along the emotional, cognitive in those areas in terms of how sometimes women will feel, how men would think. You still tend to see some certain generalizations bearing out there. Yeah, but they're generalizations. I see Sinclair smiling because he still probably got that bum that he won't drop. He ain't dropping it no more. turning, he turning it down for now. Okay.
All right.
But
In response to what Bishop Bynoe was saying, in terms of understanding the cognitive and the different spectrums on which we lead, both males and females, it's important to note that there are various strengths that come from each ben gender's lead. Um, as Bishop, I think it was Bishop Mark who said that, men tend to be more, or was it Bishop Bynoe said, men are more generally focused on the goals, the orientation, the goals, and be goals focused. So, but as leaders, I'm sure you guys would say, so we want to achieve this by this, and you set plans and so forth in place. And they say based on, because I was even reading some stuff and even doing this coming out of school, with Forbes, they're saying that women tend to be more compassionate and more emotional sometimes on that side, where they tend to look at the inclusivity of the total team that they may be working with. And sometimes based on the fact that that's because, generally, if your personality is goals oriented and more focused, that's how you're going to be looking at the spectrum. You're going to be looking at, let's get this done. Whereas you might not see a person's emotional state on one side, whereas a woman might realize that over here a person might be lacking in a particular area, and they say that women tend to pick up that. But more so, they say men are more goal oriented, which is good, because sometimes being goal oriented keeps the team focused, and sometimes they don't get sidetracked and distracted, and they keep on time, especially if you have a timeline in place that can help to keep you in good stead. But based on the fact, remember we looked at earlier the emotional side of things, and leaders, especially if you're a leader, you don't want to come down as um, authoritative versus probably being a democratic leader. Where you're hearing other people's views versus authoritative. This is what it is. This is how we're going to do it, and sometimes you can be misunderstood, and you can also lose good members of your team. Because you're authoritative in such a manner, and we need to be careful with that, because either both spectrums can become over authoritative, and you lose good resources, the good human resource to get something done. And I'm talking about this even in family dynamics, even especially as you all are ministers, the church dynamic, you can lose because you're authoritative. This is how it is, this is what we're doing, and you may not realize that someone over here is battling with something, so therefore you miss it. And I also say you also miss opportunities for ministry too, because you're so goal oriented that you miss out on these other opportunities also. So we have just about 5 more minutes. Any closing words?
if I could jump in there quickly, Sinclair posted 12 leadership styles for successful leaders, and you will recognize that there are different kinds of leadership. Yeah. And each of these leadership, for the most part, will have weaknesses. Like, for example, bureaucratic leaders are good because they understand the institution, they understand policy, they understand procedures and rules and regulations, but then they can become too legalistic, and that could be a weakness. Yeah, you have the transactional leader that they will get things done, but sometimes it is they're so transactional that they don't emphasize relationships. So you can have all these different kinds of leadership with their strengths and weaknesses. And something that you say, Marissa, you have to get complementary leadership. You get male and female working together in leadership, husband and wife working together in the context of the home. So that balance, that integration really helps to produce strong homes, strong churches, and so on. So we need different kinds of leaders. And that's when you look in the Bible, you actually see a plurality of leadership. This idea of only a one man leading an organization and so on, while you do have a primary leader in scripture, there's always an emphasis on a plurality of leadership, where you have different people, different perspectives, different leadership personalities, different attributes, and they're all working together by the leading and empowerment of the Holy Spirit to produce a more vibrant organization. And I think that that's one of the things that is lacking in a lot of organizations, they are too insular because they only have one type of leader and not necessarily the variety and the complement of leaders working together to accomplish a given goal. So I think that that's important.
I I want to ask quickly, Bishop, I know what does that do when it comes to the body of Christ, that type of leadership, you know, if you have that in the church, what does that kind of do to the church? Or even in
It,
a
it's
home,
yeah,
what does that do?
it strengthens the church. It causes the church to multiply. It causes the church to grow numerically. It causes the church to grow in terms of the operation of talents, gifts, abilities. The ministries grow. The church grows evangelistically. More people are utilized according to their giftings. So it really produces more of a healthy church and a healthy organization when you have that plurality of leadership working together. And that's how the early church was in the early years. When you look at Acts 2:42 to 47, you see phenomenal growth just because you had that multiplicity of leadership and you had people that were able to balance goals and relationships and focus on the purpose of God. So it can really strengthen the church and take the church to the next level.
All right. Any closing words as we were getting ready to leave? And you could check out what Sinclair shared in the post, the 12 leadership styles, and do some research, do some reading, and find out maybe where you fall on that spectrum as a leader. Bishop Mark, you want to say something?
Yeah, well, I think we had an interesting conversation this morning. I think though we still have, I think we must realize there's still a work in progress. I think we have seen tremendous improvement where the ladies are concerned, but I would say that, you know, there's still the reality where a lot of stuff is still present that could be oppressive where a lady's advancement is concerned. But I want to end here by saying that I think there'll be tremendous improvement over the years.
Yes, please. I said, my closing words, looking forward to seeing women continue to progress, honestly. And also, what my biggest concern is the lack of men understanding leadership. And we're not in a good position where women are looking for us to lead in other areas, be it financial, all the different areas, and men are coming up wanting. And that is something that is also a grave concern of mine. And I'm praying that we have a discussion, even sandwiching with this particular conversation, even these 12 type of leadership, personalities, and gender, and as far as the kingdom of God, to see how we could, make all parties better.
All right. So I want to actually look at how a person can understand their leadership style, because some person might say, well, I'm not a leader, but in some sphere you have some form of influence, whether it may be amongst friends, whether it might be amongst your family, whether it might be amongst your home, might be even, just a small core group of people. But I guess when we better understand our leadership styles, and as Sinclair always will talk about the disc model, understanding where you fall on that spectrum, you're better able to understand how you lead and your sphere of influence. Because I believe also when we as believers understand our sphere of influence, we can better impact. And there's nowhere that you should be a believer and you don't have some form of influence somewhere. There has to be someone that you can say, you know what, you say something and they take what you say, or like someone says something to you, like for example a simple thing like baking sweet bread. They might tell you, no, we don't put the coconut in, we don't put the coconut in, we like the coconut on top. Somebody might say that, and that might influence you, in terms of how you bake your sweet bread. So those spheres of influence, you must have some form of influence somewhere. So it's best for us to understand that, so we can best also better exact it and we become greater leaders. So that's it this morning for our show. That has been today's edition of Men on Monday. Leadership, men versus women, are there differences, understanding our differences, and walking in our differences. That has been today's edition of Men on Monday. Thanks to Minister Sinclair, Pastor Bynoe, Bishop Mark. Thank you so much for joining us today on our show of Men on Monday. Don't forget to check out Healthy Cottage, and also Pastor Bynoe has his book out, The 8 Success Factors for, of course, a successful life. So make sure that you check him out on on Amazon. Check him out this morning. And of course, make your purchase there also. And don't forget, those of you who are with us, follow us on our new YouTube channel. That's Unifying Families Worldwide. Unifying Families Worldwide. Look for that worldwide. That means you're on the right channel when you've liked that worldwide that one. So Unifying Families Worldwide. That has been today's edition of Men on Monday. God bless you. Thank you so much for joining us and have a great week.